Good morning, friends. I don't know if it's morning or evening where you're watching, but it's Storybook Character Day at my school today. And do you know who I am? I am Pippi Longstocking. And so I thought I would read you a little bit from Pippi Longstocking. Chapter 1. Pippi moves into Villa Villacula. Way out at the end of a little tiny town was an overgrown garden, and in the garden was an old house, and in the old house lived Pippi Longstocking. She was 9 years old, and she lived there all alone. She had no mother and no father, and that was, of course, very nice because there was no one to tell her to go to bed when she was just having the most fun, and no one could make her take cod liver oil when she preferred caramel candy. Once upon a time, Pippi had a father whom she was extremely fond. Naturally, she had had a mother too, but that was so long ago that Pippi didn't remember her at all. Her mother had died when Pippi was just a tiny baby and lay in a cradle and howled so that nobody could go anywhere near her. Pippi was sure that her mother was now up in heaven, watching her little girl through a peephole in the sky. And Pippi often waved up at her and called, "Don't you worry about me. I'll always come out on top." Her father, Pippi had not forgotten. He was a sea captain who sailed on the great ocean, and Pippi had sailed with him in his ship until one day her father blew overboard in a storm and disappeared. But Pippi was absolutely certain that he would come back. He would She would never believe that he had drowned. She was sure he had floated until he landed on an island inhabited by cannibals, and she thought that he had become king of all the cannibals and went around with a golden crown on his head all day long. My papa is a cannibal king. It certainly isn't every child who has such a stylish papa, Pippa used to say with satisfaction. And as soon as my papa has built himself a boat, he will come and get me, and I'll be a cannibal princess. Hey ho, won't that be exciting? Her father had bought the old house in the garden many years ago. He thought he would live there with Pippi when he grew old and couldn't sail the seas any longer. And then this annoying thing had to happen, that he blew into the ocean, and while Pippi was waiting for him to come back, she went straight home to Villa Villacula. That was the name of the house. It stood there ready and waiting for her. One lovely summer evening she had said goodbye to all the sailors on her father's boat. They were all so fond of Pippi, and she of them. "So long, boys," she said, and kissed each one of them on the forehead. "Don't you worry about me. I'll always come out on top." Two things she took with her from the ship: a little monkey, whose name was Mr. Nilsson. He was a present from her father, and a big suitcase full of gold pieces. The sailors stood up on the deck and watched as long as they could see her. She walked straight ahead without looking back at all, and with Mr. Nilsson on her shoulder and her suitcase in her hand. "A remarkable child," said one of the sailors as Pippi disappeared in the distance. He was right. Pippi was indeed a remarkable child. The most remarkable thing about her was that she was so strong. She was so very strong that in the whole wide world there was not a single police officer who was as strong as she. Why, she could lift a whole horse if she wanted to. And she wanted to. She had a horse of her own that she bought with one of her many gold pieces the day she came home to Villa Villacula. She had always longed for a horse, and now here was one living on her porch. When Pippi wanted to drink her afternoon coffee there, she simply lifted him down into the garden. Beside Villa Villacula was another garden and another house. In that house lived a father and a mother and two charming children, a boy and a girl. The boy's name was Tommy, and the girl's was Annika. They were good, well brought up, and obedient children. Tommy would never think of biting his nails, and he always did exactly what his mother told him to do. Annika never fussed when she didn't get her own way, and she always looked so pretty in her well-ironed cotton dresses. She took the greatest care not to get them dirty. Tommy and Annika played nicely with each other in their garden, but they had often wished for a playmate. While Pippi was still sailing on the ocean with her father, they often used to hang over the fence and say to each other, "Isn't it silly that nobody ever moves into that house? Somebody ought to live there, somebody with children." On that lovely summer evening when Pippi for the first time stepped over the threshold of Villa Villacula, Tommy and Annika were not home. They had gone to visit their grandmother for a week, and so they had no idea that anybody had moved into the house next door. On the first day after they came home again, they stood by the gate, looking out onto the street. And even then, they didn't know there was actually a playmate so near. Just as they were standing there considering what they should do and wondering whether anything exciting was likely to happen, or whether it was going to be one of those dull days when they couldn't think of anything to play, just then the gate of Villa Coola opened, and a little girl stepped out. She was the most remarkable girl Tommy and Annika had ever seen. She was Miss Pippi Longstocking, out for her morning promenade. This is the way she looked. Her hair, the color of a carrot, was braided in two tight braids that stuck straight out. Her nose was the shape of a very small potato and was dotted all over with freckles. It must be admitted that the mouth under this nose was a very wide one, with strong white teeth. Her dress was rather unusual. Pippi herself had made it. She had meant it to be blue, but there wasn't quite enough blue cloth, so Pippi had sewed little red pieces on it here and there. On her long, thin legs she wore a pair of long stockings, one brown and the other black, and she had a pair of black shoes that were exactly twice as long as her feet. These shoes her father had bought for her in South America, so that Pippi should have something to grow into. She never wanted to wear any others. But the thing that made Tommy and Annika open their eyes widest of all was the monkey sitting on this strange girl's shoulder. It was a little monkey dressed in blue pants and a yellow jacket and a white straw hat. Pippi walked along the street with one foot on the sidewalk and the other in the gutter. Tommy and Annika watched as long as they could see her. In a little while she came back, and she was now walking backward. That was because she didn't want to turn around to get home. When she reached Tommy and Annika's gate, she stopped. The children looked at each other in silence. At last Tommy spoke. "Why did you walk backward?" "Why did I walk backward?" said Pippi. "Isn't this a free country? Can't a person walk any way he wants to? For that matter, let me tell you that in Egypt everybody walks that way, and nobody thinks it's the least bit strange." "How do you know?" asked Tommy. "You've never been to Egypt, have you?" "I've never been in Egypt? Indeed I have. That's one thing you can be sure of. I've been all over the world, and I've seen many stranger things than people walking backward. I wonder what you would have said if I had come along walking on my hands the way they do in farthest India." "Now you must be lying," said Tommy. Pippi thought a moment. "You're right," she said sadly. "I am lying." "It's wicked to lie," said Annika, who at last gathered up enough courage to speak. "Yes, it's very wicked to lie," said Pippi, even more sadly. "But I forget it now and then. And how can you expect a little child whose mother is an angel and whose father is the king of a cannibal island and herself has sailed the ocean all of her life, how can you expect her to tell the truth always? And for that matter," she continued, her whole freckled face lighting up, "let me tell you that in Belgian Congo there is not a single person who tells the truth. They lie all day long, begin at 7 in the morning and keep on till sundown. So if I should happen to lie now and then, you must try to excuse me, and remember that it is only because I stayed in the Belgian Congo a little too long." "We can be friends anyway, can't we?" "Oh, sure," said Tommy, and realized suddenly that this was not going to be one of those dull days. "By the way, why couldn't you come and have breakfast with me?" asked Pippi. "Why not?" said Tommy. "Come on, let's go." "Oh, yes, let's," said Annika. "But first I must introduce you to Mr. Nilsson," said Pippi, and the little monkey took off his cap and bowed politely. Then they all went through Villa Coola's tumble-down gate garden, along the gravel path, bordered with old moss-covered trees. Really good climbing trees they seemed to be, up to the house and onto the porch. There stood the horse, munching oats out of a soup bowl. "Why do you have a horse on the porch?" asked Tommy. All horses he knew lived in stables. "Well," said Pippi thoughtfully, "he'd be in the way in the kitchen, and he doesn't like the parlor." Tommy and Annika patted the horse and then went on into the house. It had a kitchen, a parlor, and a bedroom, but it certainly looked as if Pippi had forgotten to do her Friday cleaning that week. Tommy and Annika looked around cautiously, just in case the king of Cannibal Isles might be sitting in a corner somewhere. They had never seen a cannibal king in all their lives, but there was no father to be seen, nor any mother either. Annika said, of course, Do you live here all alone? Of course not, said Pippi. Mr. Nilsson and the horse live here too. Yes, but I mean, don't you have any mother or father? No, not the least little tiny bit of a one, said Pippi happily. But who tells you when to go to bed at night and things like that, said Annika. I tell myself, said Pippi. First, I tell myself in a nice, friendly way, and then, if I don't mind, I tell myself again more sharply. And if I still don't mind, then I'm in for a spanking, see? Tommy and Annika didn't see it all, but they thought maybe it was a good way. Meanwhile, they'd come into the kitchen, and Pippi cried, Now we're going to make a pancake. Now we're going to make a pinky. Now we're going to fry a panky. Then she took 3 eggs and threw them in the air. One fell on her head and broke so that the yolk ran into her eyes, but the others she caught skillfully in a bowl where they smashed to pieces. I always did hear that egg yolk was good for the hair, Pippi said, wiping her eyes. You wait and see. Mine will soon begin to grow so fast it crackles. As a matter of fact, in Brazil, all the people go about with eggs in their hair, and there are no bald-headed people. Once there was a man who was so foolish that he ate his eggs instead of rubbing them on his hair. He became completely bald-headed, and when he showed himself on the street there was such a riot that the radio police were called out. While she was speaking, Pippi had neatly picked the eggshells out of the bowl with her fingers. Now she took a bath brush that hung on the wall and began to beat the pancake batter so hard that it splashed all over the walls. At last she poured what was left onto a griddle that stood on the stove. When the pancake was brown on one side, she tossed it halfway up into the ceiling so that it turned right around in the air. Then she caught it on the griddle again. And when she was ready, she threw it straight across the kitchen table, right onto a plate that stood on the table. Eat, she cried, eat before it gets cold. And Tommy and Annika ate and thought it was a very good pancake. Afterward, Pippi invited them to step into the parlor. A parlor is an old-fashioned name for a living room. There was only one piece of furniture in there. It was a huge chest with many tiny drawers. Pippi opened the drawer and showed Tommy and Annika all the treasures she kept there. There were wonderful birds' eggs, strange shells, stones, pretty little boxes, lovely silver mirrors, pearl necklaces, and many other things that Pippi and her father had bought on their journeys around the world. Pippi gave each one of her new playmates a little gift to remember her by. Tommy got a dagger with a shining, shimmering mother-of-pearl handle. A dagger is like a knife. And Annika a little box with a cover decorated with pink shells. In the box there was a ring with a green stone. Suppose you go home now, said Pippi, so that you can come back tomorrow. Because if you don't go home, you can't come back, and that would be a shame. Tommy and Annika agreed that that would indeed. So they went home, past the horse, who had now eaten up all the oats, and out through the gate of Villa Villacula. Mr. Nilsson waved his hat at them as they left. So that's the end of chapter 1 of Pippi Longstocking. So I may come back and read you more chapters of this, but if I don't, you can find this book in the library and maybe read it at home. Isn't she fun? That's my inspiration for my hair today. Have a wonderful day, friends.